slow motion like a dream. See that? I'm left empty like the temple turned into a fox. Then bust fumes, drip, spitting through the city summer sun, sifting through the ash, only the vision listening to the hiss, lifting off a nighttime motion. Shim, shim, shimmering, singeing hair on my skin, whispering where you been, where you been, where you been. I said up from amidst the darkness, set sail with the soft knees, breeze, traveling across the seas of vision from within Mount Zion. Wind coming in is picking up momentum, cutting can speak through the thickness, riding on a rhythm, like a roller coaster, sizzling, twizzling down.
Hello everyone, welcome to OneShul. My name is Patrick Aleph. I'm the Executive Director of PunkTorah, which is OneShul's sort of big parent. I want to welcome you all here. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm really excited about teaching this class tonight, which I'm calling Holy Imperfection, or Why God Made You Crazy. It is 1 after 8. We generally wait a couple minutes and let people log into the chat room and to kind of get ready to participate a little bit. Please let me know that I'm coming through okay, that you can hear me all right, that you're seeing everything okay. Obviously, I can't see what you can see, so it helps me to know just what's going on. So I want to welcome a couple of people that we got here. Carl led an amazing Open Torah chat last Thursday, which was just awesome. We had a great time with it. Carl's going to be leading not this Thursday, but next Thursday, another Open Torah chat, which is going to be fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm glad that we suckered him into it. No, I'm just kidding. So that's really great. Eric, welcome. Jared, always great to have you. Orthopunk, good to see you again. And then Tamara, welcome Tamara. I hope I'm saying, is it Tamara or Tamara? I'm not sure. All I can do is read it. So thank you so much for joining us. We've got other people who are also here but have not logged into the chat room. Now, why would you log into the chat room? So you can ask questions, so that you can argue, so you can debate, so that you can give your opinion. This is about you. You need to be represented. So I want you to go on ahead, get that little bit of technology courage up, and just come up with a name. Type in your name, a name you want to go by, whatever the case may be, and join the conversation. I really want feedback because what I'll tell you about in just a minute, the reason why I want to do this class, there's a reason why I want as much feedback as possible from everyone. So log into the chat room so that you can participate. Now, normally on Monday nights we have something called Torah Together. And Torah Together is a weekly Torah study. We take the week's Torah portion, we dissect it, we debate it, we read it together, we look at Midrash, we look at history and archaeology and all sorts of other exciting things. And we try to come up with how Torah can be meaningful to us. Now, unfortunately, Rivka, who is our usual Torah leader, is unavailable right now. Rivka was sick. Luckily, Rivka's doing a lot better, and so we're obviously grateful, Baruch Hashem, that Rivka is feeling better. However, Rivka's computer is not doing very well, so Rivka has not been available online, as much as Rivka normally is. So, unfortunately, we've kind of not had Torah Together with Rivka in a while. And last I heard when I talked to Rivka's computer needed one more part, and then hopefully things will be better. So we should be getting Rivka and Torah Together back up online pretty soon, but for now you'll have to deal with me. So, why a class called Holy Imperfection? Well, I've been reading a really great book for rabbinical school called The 10 Rungs, and it's by a philosopher named Martin Buber. And Martin grew up Orthodox. He was raised in an Orthodox family, sort of left Orthodoxy and ended up studying philosophy, secular philosophy, ended up becoming one of the sort of great modern Jewish philosophers, and wrote amazing books like I, Thou, and a lot of other great books. and is really one of those people that we look to today as sort of being a sort of Maimonides or Rashi of current current biblical exegesis, and so I've been reading this book, The 10 Rungs, and The 10 Rungs is a collection of Hasidic parables. I've been reading it for rabbinical school, and I've also been reading other texts, so I have to read Shulchan Aruch, which is the Code of Jewish Law. I obviously have to read the Torah, and a lot of other texts. And around the same time that I started school, I heard about a book that was going to be coming out called Esau's Blessings. And Esau's Blessings is about Judaism and disabilities. Now, I don't really know that much about disabilities, but I was thinking about sort of some of the ideas that the author brought up in a radio interview I was listening to, talking about Moses and him having some disabilities with how he spoke. Obviously, we know the very famous verse where he says, "I am slow of speech." And there's a lot of other sort of instances like that in the Torah. And then the other thing that brought this all together was I was at a Torah study at a local synagogue, and someone asked me what I got out of Torah. Like, what's my on one foot with Judaism? And so when I mean on one foot, that comes from a famous quote. Rabbi Hillel was asked by a potential proselyte, explain to me all of Torah on one foot. So Hillel gets on one foot and he says, do unto others, or that which is hateful, do not do to your neighbor. The golden rule. So I was asked, what's my Hillel golden rule, boiling down all of Torah? And so I thought about it for a minute, and I said, okay, I think that the whole of Torah can be summed up as anyone can be holy. So that's like my current, sort of not yet a rabbi, but rabbinical big time statement. That's kind of what I rest all of Judaism on, is this idea of everyone can be holy. And so then, of course, naturally, someone was like, all right, tough guy, back it up. So this is my way of backing it up. So why did I call this class Why God Made You Crazy, or Holy Imperfection? What is a very common stereotype of Jewish people? Does anyone know what would be a common stereotype of Jewish people? Sort of Larry David, Dr. Katz. I'm trying to throw out a few different kind of scenarios here. What is some little clues here? What's a stereotype of Jewish people? Orthopunk says we're intellectual. Okay, intellectual's part of it. Always sick and make good jokes. Okay, we're getting there. How do we combine the intellectual and the sick together? We're getting close to it. What's a profession that Jewish people are sometimes associated with? What is something that Jewish people do? Psychiatry. Yes, psychiatry. Therapists, yes. So the joke is the neurotic Jew, right? The neurotic Jewish person, that just kind of can't get out of their head and has all these mental problems and has to go to therapy to deal with all of these, issues, the sort of Woody Allen-esque types of things. And so I started wondering about that, why do we have this perception of ourselves and sort of within the community that we're these neurotic, mentally morose people and we all need to be in therapy and all these other things. And then I combined that with the whole holiness, everyone being holy thing, and this is what I came up with, is this idea of holy imperfection. So the notes for tonight's class are above the chat room. You'll see it says download the text for tonight's class by clicking here. If you're watching this after the fact, you can send me an email, patrick@punktorah.org, and I will send you the notes. But if I keep looking down, it's because I'm reading this. So, the first thing that we're going to talk about, other religions often teach their followers to be perfect like the sages of that religion. So can someone give me an example of a religion that teaches you to be more like its follower, let's say, or some person who's bigger than life? What's a religion that has that as being a major component, that you are to be like XYZ person? Give me an example. There's two very obvious ones, and if you want to cheat, they're in your notes. And in the meantime, I'm going to get my water. So what is a religion that teaches us to be more like... So what is a religion that teaches us to be more like its founder or something like that? Buddhism, great example. Thank you, Rebecca. So Buddhism is an excellent example. Yeah, I did. I lost a little bit of bandwidth there all of a sudden. So I'm sorry about that. So Christianity, Islam, these are all examples. Catholicism, which we could connect with Christianity. So these are all religions that teach the idea of the perfect archetype. So the perfect person, the person that we should strive to be more like. So I started thinking, does Judaism have that? And I don't think that Judaism does. As a matter of fact, I think that Judaism has the opposite. And I think that if we did have this idea of the perfect individual, then the role models that we have in the Torah would be different kinds of people. So let's talk about our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, and let's talk about everything that's wrong with them. So let's talk Lashon Hara about the Torah. So Abraham and Sarah. What's wrong with Abraham and Sarah? Does anyone want to give me some clues into some of the personality defects of Abraham and Sarah? And in addition to that, we'll go on ahead and say we also have Isaac, Rebecca, Moses, Jacob. These are all several examples. So give me some examples of these people or others who have some interesting character defects. So we've got Eric says, Abraham sleeps with Hagar. Great example. What happens with Sarah? Sarah gets upset with Hagar because she's able to conceive. So Abraham says, do whatever you want. And she pushes out Hagar. So these are obviously terrible things. OrthoPunk makes the comment they were often liars. So that's true. Jacob, steals a birthright. Rebecca, Miriam, says the same thing. They were deceitful. Abraham did not even claim Sarah for his wife for social reasons. May have been a sociopath. Okay, great point. They try to kill each other. Another great example. We have Abraham slaying Isaac, or attempting to slay Isaac, I should say. So these are all examples. So here's a quick rundown. So you have Abraham and Sarah's sexual tryst. That's in Genesis 16. Isaac had what's called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. He was almost sacrificed by his father. How do we know that? Well, Isaac is mostly silent. If you think about Isaac, you really don't come up with much. His father sends someone to choose a wife for him. The man can't even choose his own wife. And he later is blind. He remains silent when Jacob steals his brother's birthright. His own wife, Rebecca, aids in all of this. Let's talk about Moses. Moses was a murderer. This is in Exodus 2. He has a stuttering problem, which we talked about. He could not enter the promised land because he disobeyed God. That's Numbers chapter 20. Moses also had some problems dealing with the Israelites. He was not as good at being responsible to them as, this perfect archetype probably should be. So we have Parshat Beshalach, which was last week. We have Parshat Yitro, which I believe is this week. And these are great examples of some of these different issues. Now, we have other people who have other problems other than just the patriarchs and Moses. There's obviously the story with Judah and Tamar. Joshua was a genocidal killer. Aaron's sons had some kind of problem when they went into the Mishkan. Solomon and Bathsheba. King David had 400 wives and concubines and did all kinds of other nasty stuff. So this is just a taste. This is just a taste of what some of these issues are. So my argument is we don't have this archetype of perfection. We don't have someone who really stands up as being that person who is, faultless in any way, shape, or form. We don't have this angelic type of image of the perfect human being whom we are to strive to be more like. Instead, we have people that are flawed, that are frail, that often do peculiar things, and in this case, some very sort of unethical kind of sounding things. So we can kind of excuse away some of this behavior. And what we do is we say, for their time. So as an example, Noah is called a righteous man for his time, which is a little bit of a jab at Noah, that everyone in the world was evil except for Noah, and that's why he got to survive. So it wasn't that he was a saint either, but he was the best that the world had. And we can also say that some of this is cultural. We can say, this story in the context of, Bronze Age Canaan, social mores is fine, and, we shouldn't take things literally, and, during biblical times, there were so many horrible things that our ancestors somehow stand out as better. So, these are all ways that we can kind of excuse a little bit some of the issues that are in that. But there's, several other problems. There's behavior that is not necessarily good or bad. It's called amoral. So it exists outside of morality. But that's just plain weird. So here's a few examples. The prophet Saul suffered from depression and bouts of insanity and perhaps bipolar disorder. This is 1 Shmuel. Joseph, who's the son of Jacob, obviously we just talked about Jacob, he had intense intuition. Now, the Bible describes him as having sort of prophetic abilities, the ability to interpret dreams. You could also say that he had great intuition. He had the ability to look at Pharaoh, to sort of read Pharaoh's dreams, to understand, what would have been going on in Pharaoh's mind, and how he could best understand the dreams that Pharaoh was having. So there's a certain level of an ability to read other people that he seemed to have. But, he was also an egomaniac. So, there you go. You've got that issue as well. That's in Genesis 37. Jeremiah, not the Jeremiah who was in the chat room a minute ago, someone else. Jeremiah shows signs of depression. Here's one that's really gross. Ezekiel ate food cooked from human excrement and also laid on his side for over a year. So if I remember correctly, it was something like 360 days on one side, and then I think that was the left side, and then 40 days on the right side, something like that. So we have this really bizarre behavior, as Aaron is saying here, bed sores galore, absolutely. So we have these very bizarre behaviors. So we have the sort of immoral behavior, which, okay, blah, 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 we excuse away. We have the amoral, strange behavior, and that is sort of attributed to the problem of being a prophet. That in the Torah, or I should say in the Tanakh at this point, the people who have the ability of prophecy often get a little bit goofed up. Their experience of the divine can kind of do numbers on them. What's interesting is that the people God chooses all have the same traits in common. And I gathered this sort of line of thinking from a book called God of Old. That's by James Kugel. And we'll get into what some of these traits are. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? Any questions about anything that I've covered before we get into the idea of what do prophets all have in common? Because they have some very interesting things in common. Okay, well, we've got people guessing what the traits are, so there's no questions. I'll go on ahead and move on then. So here's some of the traits that prophets and people who are communicating directly with God seem to have in common. The first is that they're generally the wrong people for the right job. Now, what does that mean? You take, for instance, Moses. Great example. Here's a person who, when he encounters God, his first reaction with his sort of, as Martin Buber will say, I-thou conversation with God is really quite interesting. So Moses is wandering around tending to his father-in-law's flock, and he sees the burning bush. And what gets his attention is the fact that this bush is on fire, but is not being consumed. And then he hears, Moses, Moses, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. Now, I would like to propose something. If God was to come to me right now, if I'm driving down Peachtree Street here in Atlanta, and all of a sudden I see a trash can on fire that's not being consumed, and I hear a voice, I'm going to be more freaked out by the fact that I'm hearing a voice than the fact that I see a trash can on fire that isn't being consumed. But an interesting thing that happens throughout the Bible is the fact that when prophets and when people in general encounter the divine, what generally is a problem for them is the fact that their reality is being interrupted. It's not about, oh, God is here, this big, huge, transcendental thing. It's just, oh no, God is here. What do you want? And that's more of the experience that prophets tend to have. It's more about, I was doing fine before, and now all of a sudden I'm being almost afflicted by God. Throughout the Bible, it reads, you cannot see God and live. Very many times throughout the Bible, you hear prophets saying something like, I turned away so that I wouldn't die, things like that. So there was this real sense that, if you saw God, it was all over. And that's really what the issue is, this sort of being disturbed by the fact that God is there. Not that you're even seeing God. God is not really even the issue. It's just, I'm going to die because God is here. And that this is a really big problem. They also try to get out of it. So Jonah is a great example of that. Jonah did not want to be a prophet. He ran away. He got on a boat. He got swallowed by a gigantic fish. Obviously, talking about Moses here, and him arguing with God 3 times that he was the wrong person to do this. And this continues on and on. There's always some issue of not being the right person, not being equipped to handle it. In the Moses narrative, which is probably the best example, God even says, you have Aaron. Aaron's going to be the one that's going to, to talk for you, So God even gives Moses that concession by saying, fine, right, you're not the right person to handle this. Let's get your brother involved. Let's make this like a group project. So Rebecca Bot Miriam says, and then Noah sat up outside the town practically with popcorn waiting for the fireworks. So great example. Noah was not the kind of guy who's out like Abraham spreading the news. He built his boat, put his family on it, and waited for the end of the world. Is that really, that kind of great of a person? They're really the wrong kind of people. And as the second line in my notes here say, they generally don't want to endure what God is giving them. It's too much to handle. There's one story of Moses in particular where he throws his face down in the sand, and this is often interpreted to mean he was bowing and posturing in prayer. But, some might also say he's freaking out. In this week's Torah portion, he has a conversation with Yitro, his father-in-law, and his father-in-law basically tells him, Moses, you are losing your mind. You are trying to do everything. You need to appoint judges who are going to help you to deal with the level of responsibility that you have. These are people that they just simply don't want the job of being a prophet. There's very few people in the Torah who take it on willingly. Probably the best example of someone who takes it on quite willingly and happily, in terms of having the ability to communicate directly with God, is Abraham. Now, Abraham is told, Lech lecha, go and go forth, but that's it. I mean, he just kind of goes. You really don't have the kind of conversation between Abraham and God in the beginning the way that you have with Moses. Look at two of our strongest matriarchs in the Torah, in the Bible. We have Esther, and the Esther story, where God is not overtly involved in the story. God isn't actually mentioned. She saves, becomes a part of this sort of rebellion, for lack of a better word, against the evil Haman. And then you have Ruth. That's another book where God isn't overtly involved. And the story of Ruth is a story of a woman trying to survive. So these, overwhelming prophets, who are dealing with God are just in the worst possible position. The people who take it on willingly, people like, Esther and Ruth, God isn't overtly involved in the story. It's really just about their own human survival. So it's a different kind of set of circumstances. OrthoPunk has made the comment, I certainly wouldn't be stoked to be a prophet. They tend to have a lot of bad news bears showing up. Absolutely. OrthoPunk also says Esther is practically told by Mordecai that if she doesn't willingly save the Jews, someone else will be in her place. So, these are really the kinds of circumstances that people are under. They don't want to deal with what God is pushing on them. Their experience with the life that God has given them causes them tremendous personal problems, which is, hence their avoidance. So like OrthoPunk says, bad things happen to good people in this case. And we can read all through the Bible examples of people who took these things on. Job is a great example. Job was the faithful servant to God, right? And God and Satan are hanging out and they play a game of dice. And there you go, Job's life is ruined. And in the end, he's sort of, somehow restored. And that gets to my last point on, what do God's chosen have in common? They never fully win in the end. So, in the Job story, Job goes through all the trials and tribulations that he goes through. And in the end, God rewards him by giving him a new family and new animals and crops and the whole 9 yards. Now, to a writer back then, that may have been very conciliatory. That may have been a perfectly acceptable way to end the story, but really, if I lost everything, if I lost my home and my family and everything, I don't want, sitcom style wife swap where, I just get a new family in there and I get to meet them and shake their hands. I want my old family back, right? Aaron makes the perfect example. Moses loses everything because he hit a rock too hard. So Moses brought forth water from a rock by hitting it as opposed to waving his staff over it, and God says you can't go to the promised land. Think about that. Think about all of the things that Moses had to go through, and in the end, what does he get? He gets the last line of Deuteronomy where it says, and there has never arisen, out of Israel a Hebrew, a prophet such as Moses. Well, he's also the only guy to be buried by God. So, that's great, but you're dead. So, what good is that? So this all sounds like negative stuff, right? Like we're all really unhappy about God at this point. Like we're all thinking, maybe those Jews have it all figured out. Maybe we do need to just sit under Bodhi trees and not worry about this stuff. But, for every negative, there's a positive. And so there are some really great positive points for each one of these things. Are there any questions, anything before I move on to the positive aspects of all of this? All right, well, I will go on ahead and move on then to what are the positive aspects of all these horrible things. So to recap, the 4 things that all chosen people have in common. They're the wrong people. They don't want to endure what God is giving them. Their experience with the life that God has given them causes them tremendous personal problems, and they never fully win in the end. So life stinks and then you die is basically where we're at with this. So what could possibly be positive about this? Well, so the first point, prophets are the wrong people for the right job. Well, what's the positive on this? God is smarter than you are. And that's really a big point there. God is smarter than you are. One of the cool things about the Jewish religion is we're the only religion that has figured out resurrection. The way that we figured out resurrection was to keep alive the memories of all of these people. We codified them. So even if we think that Abraham and Sarah were the worst married couple ever, if we think Moses was a stuttering murderer, if we think that Jacob was a thief, or that Joshua was a genocidal maniac, or whatever the case may be, the bottom line is we have resurrected these people into infinity. As long as there are Jews, there will be these stories and there will be these people. God is smarter than we are. And so when God chooses certain people, we have to kind of understand that God knows something that we don't know. There's a great midrash on this. So here's a pop quiz. In Midrash Rabbah, it talks about, I want to say that's right, Midrash Rabbah. I'm not sure. I might be wrong on that. Talks about Moses and why God picked Moses. Does anyone know why God picked Moses in spite of the fact that he had all of these clear personal problems? It's the most random reason of all time that Moses was chosen among all the Hebrews to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt. Carl says because he was not a slave. That wasn't. That may be possible, but that's not what the particular text reads. But that's an interesting point. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with his slavery. It has nothing to do with him being part of the Egyptian pantheon for a while. It has nothing to do with anything like that. I'll give you some hints. It has to do with what happened to him once he left the Pharaoh's court and was out among the Midianites. Because he only drank Hebrew milk, Chalav Yisrael. That's awesome, but no. But it does have to do with animals, so it's pretty close. I'll give someone one more shot. So now you know it has to deal with something in Midian, the Midianites, and it has to do with animals. And this is the reason why Moses was picked to lead us out of Mitzrayim. I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, time's up. So there is a teaching that the reason why Moses was picked was that he was kind to little animals. Oh, and that's sweet. Yep, Rebecca got it right, because he was a shepherd. So the teaching was that if he could guide these little animals that basically didn't have brains, then he could lead us. And that's what it has to deal with, is the fact that he was kind to little animals. And you have to think about, what it would have been like to lead slaves out of bondage, that you would have had people who had been treated as animals. And Moses was the right person because he spent a good part of his adult life. You have to remember, everything that happens in the Moses narrative happens when Moses is an old man. The story that we have from the movie The Prince of Egypt, where you've got the young, I don't even know who did Moses' voice now. I know Val Kilmer was God. I don't remember who did Moses' voice in The Prince of Egypt. But this idea of sort of the young, slick Disney Moses, that's not the case. Moses was an old man by the time all of this sort of stuff went down. He spent his time as a menial laborer. It was not exactly a glamorous job to be a shepherd, but he knew how to treat little animals, little simple creatures, and he knew what they needed, and he knew how to take care of them. And it was because of his gentleness that he was able to be given possibly the greatest role in Jewish history, really. So something really nice about that. God was able to pick out that one particular quality that he had, that he cultivated in his adulthood while doing a job that is absolutely awful. It's kind of like the CEO of some huge company, let's say, let's say like Walmart or something like that. Let's say the CEO of Walmart decides to pick a new, I don't know what the secondary assistant CEO. I'm making this up. It would be like the CEO of Walmart picking an assistant who, for the past 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, had been the guy who cleaned toilets. I mean, really, that's basically what this was like. The shepherd job was that was a pretty sort of low on the bench kind of thing. Got a few great comments here. Jeremy makes an interesting comment. That doesn't seem random. Doesn't it mean a lot to see how people treat those who are more vulnerable? So yeah, absolutely. Rebecca Bat Miriam says, I agree with Jeremy. If you know someone is good with kids, you ask them to babysit. Great example. And Orthopunk makes the great comment that James Earl Jones's voice should have been the voice of God, because he was the voice of Darth Vader. So, great point. So the bottom line is, God is smarter than you. God has the ability to pick out whatever that one thing is, your baby animal thing, your whatever the case was, and extract that from you, and to give you the role that you are really suited for. Another positive, which may sound like a negative, you don't have a choice. You do not have a choice that you came into life with the family that you had, with the background that you had, the color of your skin, the religion that you were born into, the country that you were born in. You do not have a choice. It was not your choice that you came from a family of drug addicts, or that your parents divorced, or whatever troubles you. from your beginnings. You know, you didn't choose to be born into a rich family that never paid attention to you, or whatever the case may be. You didn't choose those things. Now, that may seem like, you know, a horrible sort of thing and not a positive, but here's the bottom line. Since you did not make that choice, you are not responsible for it. So just sit back and relax. Just relax. A great book, and I don't remember the name of it. I wish I could remember it because I'm just now thinking of it. There's a great book, and it's like all of the things that I wish people would have told me about becoming an adult. It was something like that. I don't remember. It's just this funny little, you know, funny little book that you get in like a you know, gift shop or something, like a novelty book, coffee table book. But it was this book this woman had written. It's all the like life lessons that she wished she would have been told in like her 20s or something like that. And one of them that really made me laugh was the drawing was her sitting on a psychiatrist's couch or whatever the case is, and the psychiatrist is sitting there making his notes. And the caption below it, it says, "Blame your parents, it's all their fault, move on." And that's a pretty cool thing. And so the next panel shows her like walking out of the door of the psychiatrist's office. So that's really what the deal is. You do not have a choice. You were born with what you got. It's a simple deal. The sperm meets the egg, bam. That's where your life is going to start. It doesn't have to be where you end up, but it's where you started. So all of the sort of negativity, all of the why did this have to happen to me, all of that, that is an amoral, not good, not bad, amoral circumstance that is beyond your control. Let go, move on. So a few interesting things that we got going on here. There's an ad that's been reading on these buses, and Rebecca Bot Miriam brings this up. There is no God. It's okay. You're in control. So I've been seeing those a lot. So perhaps a better ad for theism would be, there is a God. It's okay. He's in control. So, you know, an interesting... you know, I think that that's fantastic. And I do. I think that that's a really good way of looking at it, which is from the vantage point of your beginning. You know, when you were conceived, you did not have a choice. You know, you did not have free will in that way. So what happened to you from the point of gestation to, you know, 18 or whatever the case may be, depending on the country you're from, the culture you live in, and the family you grew up in, was not your choice. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. It is what it is. Move on. The third point, whatever is your problem, someone holier, better, had it worse than you. So this is a really interesting point. When we look at the stories that are in the Bible, you see people who actually are holy. So you have, you know, Job was this incredibly, you know, devout person, and, you know, he tried to be the best that he could be, and bad things happened to him. I think sometimes the Jewish tradition in our texts don't stand to teach us how to be better people. They provide us opportunities to see how bad it could be and how other people dealt with it, for better or for worse. Whatever your problem is, someone holier than you, better than you, more moral than you, has it even worse. So what does that mean? Does that mean that just life stinks? I mean, that sounds like the first, you know, the first sort of line of stuff that I gave you. So here's the great thing, though. If we were to judge people based on what happens to them in their life, so a great example. Often we have this mentality of blaming the victim, that somehow a woman gets raped, and it's, oh, well, she was dressed provocatively. Oh, she shouldn't have been out at night. Oh, she shouldn't have gone home with that guy. You know, great examples there. Well, if you had not done drugs, well, if you had not been drinking, then you wouldn't have been in the car accident that killed so-and-so, whatever the case may be. Somehow that makes it okay. That makes all of the bad things happen to you perfectly acceptable. And this is sort of the book of Job-esque types of things. It's important to remember that the world doesn't necessarily work that way. The good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, and etc., etc. Bad things can happen to good people, good things can happen to bad people. And to remember, again, that wherever you're at in life, at that very moment, someone who is a better person than you has it really bad, and someone who is a worse person than you has it better. And you're there in the middle. And so beating yourself up over the seemingly immoral or amoral nature of God in the universe does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. All it does is drive you crazy. And you are holy. If Abraham is holy, you are holy. If Moses, the murdering stutterer, is holy, you are holy. If Ezekiel, the guy who ate food cooked on human dung, is holy, you are holy. I guarantee you that you have not done some of those things, and you are holy. You are holy because the bar that is set for holiness is not, you are this good, therefore you're holy, or you have somehow hit the holiness quotient, or, you have done XYZ number of good things, therefore you are holy. The Torah takes it from the perspective that you are holy. It's just that simple. So, what happens to you in life, where you wind up, has nothing to do with whether or not you were good enough. Now, Aaron makes a great point here. You should take responsibility for the things that you do. That's true. I'm not debating that at all. The comment that I would make is it doesn't say anything about your personality, and it doesn't say anything about whether or not you are a good person. You can make bad decisions, you can have repercussions for those bad decisions, but it doesn't say anything about who this type of person is. So then, the last part here talked about the idea of, you'll never fully win, life stinks and then you die. What's the upside of that? If life is inevitably crummy, if life is unfair, if you've been dealt the wrong hand, that you somehow deserve better, if life is inevitably bad, then the reward must be that there are moments of joy in between the bad. So this is an example that I took from Buddhism. And I don't have a really good example, but let me use, I'll use this cup. Okay, so if this were like a teacup, it would work a little bit better instead of a plastic Nalgene. But let's say I've got my perfect drink in here, something that I really love, some beverage that, really, really does it for me. And I'm drinking it and I'm enjoying it and all of that. That's a positive experience. If I set it down and then it falls off the table and breaks, that's a negative experience. That's something sad, right? So what we can do by looking at sort of all of the text here and seeing, what happens to people, the fact that prophets are people who have bad things happen to them, that they're people who oftentimes can't deal with God and what God puts in their life. Nevertheless, they do have positive experiences, and the positive experiences are the punctuations. As Sarah here is saying, you make the best out of the worst. So the joy of life is not the idea that you won in the end, because you're not going to win. No one in the Torah wins. They always lose because you're going to die. That is the end. You will inevitably lose. The joy is the fact that even up to that point where you take your last breath, you could have positive moments. There's a great story about a sage named Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva was just a brilliant man. So he was illiterate up to age 40. He didn't know any Hebrew at all. And then he had this passion that he wanted to learn Judaism. He wanted to understand Jewish law, and he wanted to be able to read in Hebrew and read the ancient texts and all of this sort of thing. And so he literally sat with little kids, and he learned the alphabet. As Gedalia says, he was a late bloomer. So he, wanted to learn all of these things, and so he literally sat with 5-year-olds and he learned the alphabet, and then he just worked his way through it. Aaron makes the point of the Baal Shem Tov. Same type of thing, coming to the experience of God later in life, and going at it slowly. Now, with Rabbi Akiva, he became one of these great sages, just a brilliant, brilliant person. And his untimely end, was that he was tortured and murdered by the Romans. And so for all of the good things he did, and for this great life that he led, his final demise was the Romans. The Romans killed him. And they did it in the worst way possible. I forget what it's called, but they basically took a metal rake with sharp, sharp ends, and they scraped it across his body. I mean, it's the worst type of flagellation possible. So there's a story that as this is about to happen to him, he starts to pray, and Aaron brings it up. He says the Shema as he died. So as he's dying, he's saying the evening prayers. And there's a story that goes to, Aaron, you don't need to be sorry. I'm glad you said it. That's what we're here to do. We're here to interact. So there's this story that his students were surrounding his body while he's bleeding out and is praying. And one of them said, Master, how can you be praying right now? Like, this is the worst possible thing that can happen. Like, how can you have this? And basically what he says was, I have lived my life with the belief that at some point I was going to fight with, all of my heart and all of my soul and with all of my might, and that I was going to give up as much of myself to God as possible. Now, I finally have that opportunity. And so for him, it was a sacred experience. His death became a sacred experience. That's pretty hardcore. It's hardcore to think that here's a man who's been tortured and is laying down and his body is just dripping blood everywhere. And he's like thinking, wow, I finally get to have this moment with God that I wouldn't otherwise get to have. I mean, that's I can barely even say that. Like, that is so intense and so powerful. So, what a great example. Here's a person who had the worst end possible. We know historically that this happened to Akiva. This isn't, some kind of myth story. I mean, it really, we know Rabbi Akiva was slaughtered by the Romans. And, here he is laying there, and he's like, well, if I'm going to be raked and I'm going to bleed out and die, I can pray now. And then I get to be a part of God. So, a great example of this last part. If life is inevitably crummy, then the reward is the moments of joy in between. That he found joy right there. His last bit of joy was that he got to say the evening prayer, which he had been saying for, who knows how long. So I'm going to quick go over Martin Buber's The 10 Rungs. So The 10 Rungs is a really great book. It's a collection of Hasidic teaching, and instead of reading it, because it would take a very, very long time to read all of that, I'm just going to read over a couple of exciting things that I want you to take from this class and sort of think about. And then I want, as you've been thinking about this, to email me. So my email address is patrick@punktorah.org. Now there's been between 16 to 30 people in the classroom tonight. So I expect as a minimum 16 emails by Shabbat. 16 people to email me and to tell me their thoughts on this. So I'm going to run through these real quick, and then I'm going to say a few more things. First of all, these are just thinking points to end on. God is jealous because human beings have something God does not have: free will and uniqueness. This is the root of who you are, for better or for worse. Think about that for a minute. There is no God that God can be compared to, right? God is the greatest among the gods. That's what Mi Chamocha, the Song of the Sea, talks about. God is God. So God can't be unique because God has no other God to compare himself to. Human beings have that. We have that privilege. We have that reward. The reward of being human is that we get to be unique. The fact that you are unique is your reward. Our relationship with God and with people is reciprocal. And so often in the 10 rungs, it talks about us being bound up with God and with human beings in a relationship where we shape one another. Now, here's the cool thing. If we're in this relationship with God and with other people, and we are continuously shaping and affecting each other, what does that mean? It means that whatever your shape is the right shape. If you bind yourself to God and to other people, and you allow yourself to be changed, and you're able to impact others, whatever shape you are, so whether that's this kind of mental shape or physical shape, that is the perfect shape for you. Every generation innovates. So in the Siddur, we pray about the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Why don't we just say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Because God's experience with each of those individual people was unique, and they in turn made a unique impact on God and a unique impact on the world. So be innovative. Whatever you are, whatever your right shape is, be innovative with it. Becoming selfless. You should assume that although you are holy, you are not holy in the sense of righteous. You are a holy person because all people are holy, but you're not necessarily righteous. When you offer up your ego as a sacrifice to God, you become like an empty vessel through which God's light, so light is a big thing in Kabbalah, can flow through. And when it flows through you, it then goes back out again and goes out into the world. So offer up your ego, make the sacrifice of yourself to God and become that sort of empty vessel. Another important point. The only reason worth worrying is that you are worrying. Overcome your obstacles, whatever they are. Everybody has stumbling blocks, right? And be vigilant of the things that are in your soul that create these obstacles. That's actually what the word Satan means. It's an obstacle, it's an obstruction. And then move on. There's not anything fundamentally wrong with you. You just have obstacles. You have to overcome them. When you overcome them, you just keep going. Loving others is the only way to love God. And as a matter of fact, in the 10 rungs, it says, love others as if there was no God at all. So what does that mean? Does that mean there is no God? Well, in Hasidism, obviously, there is a God, but we should love others as if there was no God at all. Why would we do that? Well, because it keeps us from having these religious cop-outs where we would say, okay, well, this problem that you're having, God will solve it for you. If you do that, you're taking away your responsibility to help someone, and you're taking away their responsibility to help themselves. So love others as if there was no God at all. And finally, make doing good things. Make doing good things in your life instinctual. Make it an instinct that you should naturally do a good thing. And that goes back to love others as if there is no God at all. Why is idolatry wrong? Is it wrong because there's a statue? Well, no. As a matter of fact, in Judaism, in the Torah, Moses and the Israelites are told to make a few graven images. You had to make a graven image of the cherub that goes on top of the Ark of the Covenant. There's a story where the Hebrews are afflicted, and God tells Moses to make a bronze snake, a statue of a bronze snake, and that all those who gaze upon it will be healed. So obviously it's not idolatry that's the issue in terms of making whatever this thing is. It's about worshiping something that you created, because that reinforces egoism. It reinforces this idea that this thing inside me is the most important thing ever. Well, that's not really what it's about. This thing that's in here needs to be empty. So that's why we offer up the sacrifice. That's why we love others the same way we would love ourselves, because we are eliminating that sense of, me, and you. We're clearing all of that out. And what happens when you do that? What happens when you keep behaving a certain way? Eventually it becomes ingrained. If you keep doing something over and over again, eventually you're going to become really good at it, and it becomes instinctual. A great thing about psychology, so I read this in Psychology Today, if you smile, if you make a habit of smiling, you will statistically become happier. Why? Because in the Torah it says, we shall do and we shall learn. Doing is what matters. You do it. You just do it. You be a good person. You work on the stumbling blocks that are getting in your way, and you move on. And what happens as you cultivate and keep doing good things and keep focusing on loving kindness and all of these other things, you're going to, as Zedek is saying here and Aaron is saying here, it becomes habitual, and then it becomes contagious. So it's this natural reinforcement of you do something good. It affects other people. They start doing something good. It's the whole pay it forward thing. We get into this big recycling of positive energy. And once you build up and you're sacrificing that ego, you're getting rid of that thing in there that tells you that you're wrong or you're right or whatever the case is, you become the empty vessel, and then it's nothing but good. There's just nothing but good that comes out of you. The last point I want to make, which actually isn't on my notes here, people think that self-examination, thinking a lot about themselves, and judging themselves is the same thing as all of this, selflessness. That, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to think a lot about myself and why I do the things I do, and, I really got to get in my own head. The problem is that's actually a form of idolatry, because then you're assuming two things. You're assuming first that you can solve your own problems, and that these are the problems that are wired into your brain because you're a screwed up human being. That's idolatry. You're building up the problem as being, as being the big issue. That's not it. If you had a rough childhood and now you find yourself sort of being anti-authoritarian and losing your job, the problem isn't your bad childhood. The problem is that you lost your job. Solve that problem and move on. So really interesting point there. Don't be in here. This relates back to my first point, which is what is the Jewish stereotype? Neuroticism. And what is neuroticism? It's just, being all up in here all the time. It's about worshiping the broken idol of your own screwed up head. So you got to get out of that. You got to break that. Solve the problems that are real, that exist. Recognize that life stinks and that you're going to be fine, that you are holy. Do lots of good, and you'll break free. So, a few questions looks like we have here. Carl says, if there is no perfect examples in Judaism, why are Hasidic Rebbes looked upon as perfect beings? So, Chaim Potok, who is the writer of The Chosen and My Name is Asher Lev, and a lot of other books, actually criticized Martin Buber a lot for that. There is a certain level of Tzaddik worship that does exist in some Hasidic communities, but again, I would relate it back to it's that natural urge that we need to create archetypes. It's that natural urge we have to think about self when we really need to be thinking about others. And, also this thing of, I'm broken and screwed up. Someone else needs to fix me. And that's not what it is. You have to move beyond that. And I think that that's where that comes from. So Orthopunk makes the comment, so even a Rebbe who made one or two mistakes then is considered perfect by his Hasidim. And so, that for me is, everyone is holy. We can't take every person as perfect, but we can take every person as holy. Rebecca Bot Miriam says, a friend said to me, what is God's plan for Tikkun Olam? So Tikkun Olam is the idea of the world one day being repaired. And so Rebecca's answer is, we are God's plan. There is no other plan. I would agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. We are in, if you read the 10 Rungs and you read Hasidism, we are in a reciprocal relationship with God, where every time we do something, God fires back. And so it's this back and forth all the time. It's that relationship. And I worry sometimes with the whole Tikkun Olam thing that it's now become this sort of politicized thing of, Tikkun Olam, therefore you should give money to XYZ organization. That's not what Tikkun Olam is. Tikkun Olam is the idea that if we do mitzvot, if we do commandments, and we keep doing them with fervent power and fervent energy, and we really focus on loving kindness, that the world will become better. It's not about, planting a tree, And Eric says, but we do need good leaders as examples. Absolutely. We need really good, flawed leaders. We need people who are really good at being messed up. Because that's what we all are. We're all messed up. And Aaron says, well, it can be planting a tree. Yeah, I'm being a little facetious. Yes, planting a tree is a mitzvah. But what I'm talking about really is this politicized, commoditized? Is that a word, I guess? Something like that. This idea that you can sort of sell Tikkun Olam, make checks payable to XYZ group. That's not how it works. It should be about planting a tree because Tu B'Shvat is tomorrow. Carl says, but isn't a rabbi considered a member of the community just like everyone else? They just have better opinions. It depends on the community you belong to. There are some communities where they really kind of worship a rabbi. There's others where, honestly, the rabbi gets the short end of the stick. So it really depends on where you go and what the community is like. But the bottom line is we're all frail, we're all messed up, we're all broken. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about solving the problems that you have and moving forward. And most importantly is loving others. That's really the most important thing. Okay, so I have a few things I want to go over real quick. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, online Tu B'Shvat Seder. It's going to be terrific. I've got some people coming over. We're going to have an online Tu B'Shvat Seder. We're going to talk all about Tu B'Shvat, what the holiday is. It's the birthday of the trees. It's the new year of the trees. So we're going to have a Tu B'Shvat Seder, and we're going to celebrate. So that'll be totally awesome. Let me pull up. Actually, I guess I need to pull up my calendar here so I can know everything that's going on. Okay, so the Tu B'Shvat Seder tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and then Friday we have a Shabbat service at 8 p.m. that's being, again, 8 p.m. Eastern, that's being led by Miriam. Now, beyond that, a couple of other things. We are going to have an online Purim Bazaar, a Purim Shuk, if you will. And what it's going to be is a page on the PunkTorah website where you can buy cool stuff that's been donated by the PunkTorah community. So we had someone who hand-knit kippahs. We have jewelry that Kafira is making. Kafira is the woman that made the Tu B'Shvat jewelry that we just sold, and we're so grateful to Kafira for that. We have some bands that are contributing music, CDs, and downloads. We're going to have these really cool bracha, these prayer plaques for sale as well. All kinds of great stuff. So that's all going to be available. However, I need more products. So if you're a crafter, if you're a musician, if you are a writer and you have books, if you have anything of yours that you would like to sell, that you'd like to donate to the community for us to sell, for us to be able to fund all of the projects that we do, again, send me an email, because you're going to email me anyway about these talking points, patrick@punktorah.org. And in return for donating, you're going to get an ad on the PunkTorah website on the homepage. So if you have a band that you want to promote, or a small business, or you want to promote the community, the physical Jewish community that you belong to, that's an opportunity, and you get it for a whole month, the whole month that Purim is in. So make sure to do that. Make sure to donate. Now, here's the important thing. Today is the 6th. If you want to participate, I need your stuff by Friday. Really, realistically, I need it by Friday, so that I can get it on the 13th. So please send me an email. Let me know what you're interested in donating. Again, patrick@punktorah.org, so that we can go ahead and get you set up. Again, you'll have an ad on the website. You'll have social media promotion, and you're doing a mitzvah. You're donating so that we can keep our community going. Remember, it costs $100 a month just to run OneShul. So it's very important that everyone participate in keeping our community going. Now, if you're not a crafter or a musician or a writer or one of these other things, or you don't have, cool stuff laying around that you want to get rid of, are there other things you can do? Yes, you can teach a class. I taught a class, you can teach a class. You can lead a prayer service. You can lead a Torah chat, like we're going to have next Thursday. On any subject. Doesn't just have to be a Torah chat. You could do a chat on some other Jewish issue or some other Jewish text. You could do a Jewish book club if you want to start a Jewish book club with PunkTorah and with OneShul. Send me an email. We are getting to a point now where we have at least 3 events a week. Let's make it 6. That's what I want to see. I want to see 6 events a week in the next 2 months. So that's the goal. 6 events every single week. So if you don't even want to do that, you don't want to lead, you don't want to teach, you don't have any products you want to donate financially. Again, $100 a month. What is that? That's 20 people donating $5 a piece. So the link is there, punktorah.org. Right up there, you can go to the top of the OneShul website. There's a little credit card looking thing. You can click on that. Again, if 20 people give $5, then tonight we will have paid for an entire month of OneShul. $5 is a large choco latte cracpuccino at Caribou or Starbucks. Can you give up a Starbucks for the Jewish community? I think you can. I know you can. So please donate that way. Please help the community. Also, if you ever need anything, if you need someone to talk to, if you're in a place where you're trying to learn some things Jewishly and you want someone to help you, if you're going through some stuff and you need someone just to talk to as a friend, I am here for you. Please let me know what I can do. We have a great community here. We have lots of very talented, supportive people who can help each other out. So please feel free to call me. Feel free to send me an email. I try to make myself as available as possible. So, best thing, as Carl actually knows, schedule a time with me. And that can be, a couple hours in advance if need be. Just let me know when you want to talk, and I'm there. If you want to learn more about PunkTorah, if you want to be involved in any of our projects, let me know. We're always looking for podcasters, graphic designers. We always need book editors. As a matter of fact, I need a book editor really bad right now. We need people who are good at editing video. Really need someone to help with video editing right now. For the God Project, and then also for Video Siddur, which is another project we're working on. So if you like video editing, if you like doing stuff on Macs, send me an email. That's another great way to participate. Again, patrick@punktorah.org. Tell your friends about what we do here. Tell your family. Get people involved. Again, my goal is that we have 6 events a week. Let's make that happen. Let's provide Judaism to as many people who want it as possible. So thank you very much for being here. I had fun teaching this class. I hope you had fun too. Send me an email. Let me know what you thought about it. Let me know if you've got ideas for classes. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our online Tu B'Shvat Seder. Take care. Have a wonderful night. Remember, acts of loving kindness. Love people as if there is no God at all. But remember that there is a God, and God made you holy.